Pope Formosus, you stand accused of heresy, lying, and conspiring to be Pope. What say you to those charges? Do you admit that you have wronged the Papacy and the people of the Holy Roman Empire? So you admit it, Formosus, you admit your guilt. Then I find you guilty, and I shall strip you of your popely garments. Long live me, Pope Stephen VI, or VII, depending on who you ask.
The Middle Ages were magic.
Yes, Deathlings, that very special episode of Law & Order Pope Squad really did happen because the Middle Ages were magic. It was May of 896 AD, and Stephen VII, or 6th, there's some controversy over how many Stephens there were, but the Catholic Encyclopedia and the journal Clinical Anatomy say 7, so who am I to argue? Anyway, Stephen VII had just become Pope, the 7th Pope in less than 20 years. Stephen's predecessors, the aforementioned Pope Formosus included, all had a pesky habit of getting assassinated, or mysteriously dying. Formosus died of a stroke, or poisoning. Nobody's really sure, and Stephen's direct predecessor, Pope Boniface VI, only reigned for 15 days before dying of gout, or poison. Pope John VIII, the pope who started all of Formosus's woes, was poisoned by his own people, but when the poison didn't kill him fast enough, he was bludgeoned with a hammer. It was the early days of the Holy Roman Empire. It was basically a real-life Game of Thrones, only with more popes and fewer dragons. It's way too long and convoluted to fully get into, with all the fiefdoms and emperors and bishops and Germans, but essentially the empire was fractured. Who was crowned the Holy Roman Emperor was decided by the Papacy, and the church was the center of political power. Thus, he who was pope had the most dragons. I don't know, I stopped watching Game of Thrones after the 2nd or 3rd season, so I'm just assuming that's how it works. Understandably, life as pope was fraught, but for Formosus, so was death. Shortly after Stephen ascended to the holy throne of St. Peter, he decided to put Pope Formosus on trial for crimes he was accused of during the reign of Pope John VIII, 2 decades prior, and, while he was still alive. When I say Stephen put Formosus on trial, I don't mean it figuratively. Stephen literally exhumed the corpse of Pope Formosus, dressed it in pontifical vestments, propped it up in a chair in the courtroom at the Basilica San Giovanni Laterno in Rome, and put it on trial with a deacon as defense counsel. Sucks to be that guy. It has been speculated that Stephen was pressured by the powerful Spoleto family to humiliate Formosus post-mortem. In life, Formosus had crowned Lambert of Spoleto as co-emperor, with his father, the reigning emperor, Guy III. However, one of Formosus's last acts was to crown Arnulf of Carinthia as Holy Roman Emperor, deposing Lambert. It all ended up being moot because Arnulf died the same year that Formosus did, so Lambert, supported by Stephen, FYI, became Holy Roman Emperor anyway.
Everybody got to sit in the big chair.
But you know those Spoletos, right? Because the Middle Ages and... Furthermore, and maybe this goes without saying, but it's suspected that Stephen was, well, insane, or officially induced by an evil passion. Oh, and then there was also the near hysterical hatred that Stephen had for Formosus. So yeah, Cadaver Formosus never stood a chance. The trial of Pope Formosus, or the Synodus Horrenda, or the Cadaver Synod, took place in January of 897. Formosus was charged with perjury, publicly aspiring to be pope, and for being bishop of 2 places at once, Porto in Rome and Bulgaria. The latter crimes had actually caused Formosus to be excommunicated under the reign of Pope John VIII, but Pope Marinus I had pardoned him. During the trial, Stephen screamed at the corpse of Formosus, interrogating him with the expectation that the deacon assigned to his defense would speak for him. That deacon was told to crouch down behind the corpse and speak as if he was Formosus, like some morbid ventriloquist act. When Stephen bellowed questions like,
"Why did you usurp the papacy?"
the deacon would answer as Formosus, saying, "Because I was evil." Like I said, sucks to be that guy. At one point, even God seemed to say, "Hey Stephen, take a quaalude," when an earthquake shook the basilica. But Stephen was relentless. Big shocker, Stephen found the corpse of Formosus guilty. As punishment, Formosus's corpse was stripped of his pope clothes and put in rags, and he had 3 fingers of his right hand that he used to give blessings with chopped off. Then he was buried in a commoner's grave. However, realizing that this all was still too good for Formosus, Stephen dug Formosus up and threw him in the Tiber. A monk recovered Formosus's corpse from the river and reburied him, but it seems like the people of Rome saw this as the last straw in a long string of embarrassments. What must it have been like to wake up every morning and to learn of yet another tasteless, self-serving act that your leader has committed? What must that be like? Well, the people of Rome had had enough. Crowds gathered in protest and demanded that Stephen be removed and that a proper pope replace him. Stephen was stripped of his title, thrown in jail, and was strangled to death in August of 897. You'd think after all this it would be smooth sailing back to St. Peter's Basilica for Formosus. Nope. The next pope, Pope Romanus, overturned Stephen's conviction of Formosus, but since he was overthrown in less than a year, Formosus stayed in his commoner's grave. The next pope, so many popes, Pope Theodore II, was able to recover the corpse of Formosus, but as Theodore was only pope for 20 days, it wasn't until his successor, Pope John IX, that Formosus was reinstated as pope and was buried in his original tomb in St. Peter's Basilica. John IX also forbade any future trial of a dead person. Good for you, John. And that, Deathlings, is the tale of how the corpse of Pope Formosus was put on trial and convicted by another pope. Tell me in the comments what your favorite corpse pope trial is. I'm just kidding, that's the only one. This video was made with generous donations from death enthusiasts just like you.
The Middle Ages were magic.